So, do we start right away with how we met?
Sure.
So,
Yeah. Okay. Nice. Yeah, that's a good starting point. Yeah,
how did we meet?
we met at a tantric temple night.
Mhm. Like a year ago,
Yeah, almost pretty much a year ago. Yeah.
and now we're here 1 year later, recording the third episode of my freshly started podcast. The the outcome of that temple night was a very special friendship,
Yes.
I guess. And I'm wondering, why do you attend temple nights, tantric temple nights?
Wow. Okay. What a beautiful way to begin. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to join you in this conversation today. And it's a well-timed question because I've been invited to a temple night this weekend
Mm.
with a visiting practitioner from Berlin, and I haven't had the curiosity or the interest to attend another temple night since that 1 year ago. And I'm feeling some curiosity, and I'm discussing some things with myself around whether I will attend this weekend. Um, so I've been thinking about this very question. At the time, I was about to embark on a training in sexological bodywork, and I had some big questions around what could I learn from my sexuality, from my sexual energy that I hadn't yet discovered. I was trying to sort of open a door, and having never attended an advanced temple night until before the one where we met, um, yeah, I was curious to see what it was all about, really. Now, having seen what it was all about, would I go again? Well, that's the kind of the question I'm asking myself. A big question for me um, is it just pursuit of pleasure, which is perfectly fine in my book, or is there something more connected to the heart that's possible? And so that's kind of what I try and feel out and assess before entering these kinds of spaces.
What would you say for people who haven't heard of tantric temple nights before at all?
Yeah.
What is it?
Yeah, look, I must qualify and say that I have not done um, I haven't done the kind of Ishta training, which is the temple kind of tantric training. I've done more gentle forms of tantra, like bliss dance, um, and I've done more rigorous therapeutic work, like the sexological body work. But just from the perspective of someone interested in this field, my understanding is that a temple night is an opportunity to explore intimacy with a group of other people who have similar curiosity and a willingness to pay real close attention to their boundaries, which creates a sense of safety to explore, knowing that if someone's not comfortable, they will either say so or they will remove themselves. So that kind of foundation of consent enables an exploration that's not really possible in more casual spaces. It also, is what differentiates a temple from a orgy or a kind of sex party. And I would say for it to be the kind of temple that I would want to go to, it should also contain um, the desire not just to pursue fantasy or kink or pleasure, but also to, in the sort of true tantric tradition, explore one's edges. And what we mean by edges is generally the sort of area where curiosity meets discomfort. And so that might be exploring a kind of touch or a kind of role that you haven't done before. It might be exploring a kind of a relational dynamic that you haven't explored before, a gender, a sexuality dynamic that you haven't explored before, a kind of maybe you're always receiving and you want to practice giving, but you don't know how. Maybe you're always active and you want to practice witnessing. So it's a kind of laboratory, a place of learning, really, and expanding one's capacity for not just pleasure, but erotic aliveness. So I would say that's the best case for a temple. and at its best, it can awaken, it can nourish the sort of longing for aliveness that many of us have and don't quite know how to access in our daily lives.
I love the way you expressed and described the whole concept. I couldn't have done it any better, because there's so much more. I mean, I can already anticipate the hate comments coming in, judging us for attending a space like that.
Yeah.
Because it's, sexuality is potentially the most tabooized topic in our society. And that brings me to the question, because you are you're one of maybe you're a person that talks very openly about their sexuality, which I admire, just because it's such a suppressed topic in our society. And I'm just curious, like, how did that evolve? How did you become the person that's so not only open but confident, self-confident about, exploring your sexuality and also sharing your experiences publicly?
Well, this may be the first time that I'm actually talking about it on a big sort of public platform. But it feels aligned with the way that I live my life. I mean, I think I've always been a very sensual, expressive person, if I look at myself from a child. And so I think I was naturally this way. And when I became kind of entered the early teen puberty time, I had my sexuality is generally homosexual with some explorations into bisexuality. So my homosexual thoughts and desires as a young teen, I didn't feel safe to talk about them. Even though I was in a very open environment in many respects with the family and school I was in, there were no out queer people as examples. So I repressed and kind of like divided a part of myself and put it away or put it in the dark in order to remain in connection with my community. And that created a kind of splitting. And it eroticized the sexual experiences when I did have them. So it made them incredibly powerful in a more narrow way than they are now. And it gave them quite a potent pull on my life. And I think this is not a story unique to me. Many queer individuals have this relationship to sex. And so I felt quite ruled by this strong like pull or drive for sexual experiences, and it caused kind of havoc in my life in a way. I'm trying to weave some strands together. One of the strands is that, being a naturally expressive and I would say wild person, I had to rein that in my life. This is sort of not sexually. This is just expressing emotion, expressing reaction, expressing passion, expressing need, desire. Just all of those things were very strong in me. And I would just exhaust the people around me who couldn't kind of handle this very intense child. And so I didn't just erotically suppress myself. I suppressed myself in many ways. And this is before puberty already, as a young child. Especially as a sensitive child, you can pick up when the adults around you are not coping.
Sure.
And so from a very young age, as a sensitive child, one kind of starts putting restraints in place. And in the last 5 years, my life has kind of fallen apart. I had very challenging mental health challenges, and I lost my marriage in the process. And my sexuality was defined by acting out, and by kind of being controlled by very, very strong urges and the need to sort of some compulsive behavior around sex. And having kind of had my life upended at the loss of my ability to kind of cope and manage daily life tasks, and my inability to be there for my husband at the time, that was enough to wake me up, to really attend to this fracture is too small a word, to this really deep divide between my instinctual expression of myself and the layers of repression and socialization that I developed in order to survive. And so in kind of rebuilding myself, it's a building block of that to no longer repress or shame these natural parts of myself. So if I am open, and if I talk about my experiences, and if I'm adventurous, and even if I'm wild, that is because it's more important for me to find authentic expression of those parts of myself than it is to be accepted.
Well, it's been pretty much the hero's journey in the context of Carl Jung's shadow work, right?
Yeah. I mean, I have had an amazing Jungian therapist who's walked the last 3 years with me, and he will agree with you, although I don't know much about the theory, but I know a lot about the practice because I've had to kind of, build myself up from the ground. And I have used, Jungian analysis, bodywork, tantric work, Qigong, meditation, psychedelics, and those have been the pillars, the core pillars. And I don't think it would have been possible without any one of those pillars.
Yeah, like one of the most powerful elements in my eyes from Jungian's work, it basically comes down to, if you suppress one part of yourself, you'll suppress everything, and sooner or later it will cause suffering. And the more intense the suppression and the longer it holds on, the worse it becomes. And I guess this is the reason why so many people in the end, like in our modern world, do suffer. Be it in a job they are not passionate about, they don't dare to leave because, I don't know, they studied a degree for their parents' sake and then became a doctor, a lawyer, whatsoever, and are stuck in that kind of life. Or for most people, I mean, it goes back all the way to Freud, who already discovered how much we are influenced, the whole society, or like a majority of society, by suppressing our sexuality, which is the most basal life force we got, right? But to rewire maybe a little bit, because I've always been very interested, curious, in terms of my homosexual friend's story, because I'm really in awe of, taking the step and open up about something quote unquote unnormal, right? And so, I would just be very curious about how this whole, you said you discovered it quite early in your adolescence, that you were homosexual, and how did you deal with it? in those early years?
I'm still stuck on the word non-normal. I know you're trying to be gentle about it, but I don't consider it unnormal. I don't know if the quotes imply that the society might.
Yeah.
But of course, it's a part of all culture and all history, and even the animal kingdom. So I don't consider it not normal. But many people who experience homosexual curiosity, that is their first response to it, is that there is something wrong with me, or if I explore this, there may be consequences. Yeah. So the question was just around when, or
When and how?
well, it sort of manifested in my early teens as kind of a really strong attachment to some of my male friends. And in my family, we had a big family. I'm one of four, and we had exchange students come and stay in our family, and I used to fall in love with them. And the first clue I had was, fall in love with the male ones, and was when they would start talking about their kind of the girls that they liked, and I would get really like,
Jealous.
I would feel jealous, yeah. And I was like, why am I jealous? Like, why am I jealous when they go off with this girl, or they should be spending time with me? I'm like, well, why am I feeling that way? So I thought that's quite sweet. It's kind of like because it didn't start as, that was sort of before sexual curiosity. It was almost like attachment, emotional attachment came first. Unfortunately, as is the case with many queer people, my first sexual experience was happened in the context of grooming by an older man. So I didn't have the opportunity to explore my sexuality in more natural ways, and that has had a big impact on my erotic wiring. And I'm only kind of really unraveling that, and trying to re-ravel now. 24 years, 23 years after that experience. Yeah, that was when I was 16.
When did you start opening up to your parents,
Well,
to
that was
friends?
the kind of consequence of the grooming, is that it was made, it wasn't really my choice to come out to my family.
Mm.
Everybody found out as a result of this incident. So I was quite defensive with my family. I think I was too scared. I remember being defensive and saying, "Well, I can't," making it out like it was a friendship. For context, this man had kind of talked his way into my house, and my parents saw him in my house, and it was clearly a gay older man, and so it was very obvious. And I lied about it. And I first said, "Well, I'm just exploring. Maybe I'm bi or something like that." And it was only when I was 19 that I was traveling the world, working on boats, and I told them, I wrote them a letter, and I said, "I'm not bi. I'm gay, and I need you to accept that." And it's funny now, I don't feel so gay, you know. I feel like anything is possible. And I kind of wish that I had I lived in a world where I could just explore what I wanted to explore at that time. And I feel like if I didn't need to be gay in order to, for people to take me seriously, or I'm struggling to verbalize it, but like I needed to differentiate myself as gay in order to almost reclaim the agency of not being discriminated against. But if I wasn't discriminated against, then I wouldn't maybe feel the need to separate myself as gay. I would have just explored, and maybe I would have explored being with a woman. So I have some anger and righteousness around that. That it's not around the sort of labeling. that's sort of labeled onto you first, and then in order to survive that, you have to reclaim it and as a point of pride. But I do think that ultimately, certainly for me, while I think human rights and acceptance are very, very important, I don't particularly need a label. Yeah. Yeah. Someone said something to me about, oh, but yeah, it's your sexual preference. I thought, oh, gosh, I don't. Do I need a sexual preference? Like, I don't feel I need.
Yeah, why do you think we human beings or our society is so conditioned to kind of need labels for basically everything?
Well, I think it's a fear response, really. It's a need to provide some order and containment in a world that can be very destabilizing if we don't have enough inner ground. And I think it's kind of like it's just generational trauma passed on and passed on and passed on. And men are raised, generally speaking, to fear being not being man enough or emasculated, or I think there's probably some evolutionary thing around like being a strong man or whatever. And so yeah, being gay is often or experimenting with men, or say for example being penetrated as opposed to penetrating, like those are all sort of risk of being less than a man in this kind of indoctrination. And so, yeah, I think that translates into labeling something so that you can say, that's not me. Like, I'm not that, you know?
What makes a man from your perspective then?
Well, this is a really good question. It's not something I think a lot about, because I don't, like, as much as I don't think a lot about being gay, I don't think a lot about being a man. I'm preoccupied with being like a human being who's whole, like hearted in their life, like present in their life, and living in a wholehearted way with the people around them. Like, I think that's for me a far more interesting and important focus. But of course, we have to, I think for a lot of men, it is an important question. I mean, I'm considering going on an men's initiation series this year, and they separate men and women, and it brought up a big question for me as to why, and is that important? And both you and I have attended men's work and men's groups, and there is safety in that space. And yet I, as a queer person, sometimes feel alienated in that space. So your question was, what makes a man? Yeah, I don't think I have any useful answer to that. The only thing that comes up for me is it important? Like, is it important to be a man as opposed to be a human being? To me, it's not. I would say if you were born and kind of and socialized as a man, then you've received a certain kind of lineage and baggage, and there's a responsibility on you to kind of alchemize that and work with it and root out what is not in alignment with your wholehearted living, and also what has been passed on to you that you don't want to continue, and kind of really alchemize it into something that feels resonant for you, and not just something put upon you. And then equally to call in and to invite in and to learn the parts that you're missing, the feminine, and to ultimately balance those.
How do you do that? How do you balance your masculine and your feminine parts?
Well, being gay is great. Because in the sexual act, you get to play both roles. So that's a wonderful playground for exploring that. And I encourage straight men who are not interested in sexual relations with other men to explore being penetrated with their female partners, to experience what it's like. And there's many practical ways to explore that. Beings born as biological men are given a prostate, which invites a lot of pleasure. So exploring that is a wonderful way. Well, you get rewarded for that exploration with a lot of pleasure that's unlike any other form of pleasure. But other than sexually, I think, we all, those of us who kind of carry these kinds of quote unquote typical masculine traits,
Such as?
well, I kind of don't like talking about it in this way, but just for the purposes of it, let's just say the sort of more stereotypical masculine traits of kind of action, wanting to build, wanting to make, wanting to move out into the world, wanting to imprint upon the world, wanting to build something, make something, cause a reaction in the world, like that kind of outward penetrating impulse, as opposed to the feminine kind of incubating, holding, receiving. And I use the words masculine and feminine as opposed to male and female,
Sure.
obviously quite deliberately there. So whatever your dominant kind of impulse, one way to balance your masculine and feminine is to find practices that invite or foster what is maybe less naturally present. For example, I can go to the gym and I can lift weights and I can sort of pump up my sense of my power, or I can do Qigong, which is similar to Tai Chi, which is a practice of how much can you relax and still do the movement. It's sort of a series of gentle movements.
So would you say Qigong has a rather feminine essence?
Well, no, Qigong requires a balancing of both energies, because Qigong is not purely relaxation. Qigong requires a balance. But if you are overly efforting, your kind of task doing Qigong is going to be how to relax. Mm-hmm. If you are overly relaxed and you're overly passive, your work in Qigong is going to be how do you cultivate enough energy, because it requires a lot of attention and effort, but it's not the brute effort. It's light, it's sort of focused effort. So I would say something like Qigong encourages you to, where that kind of practice, like all spiritual and embodied practices, really will reveal where your less developed parts are and will encourage you. And of course, that is uncomfortable. We would much prefer to do the thing which we are good at and reinforces our sense of self and capability in the world.
I wonder, with the tendency you just mentioned, that we stay kind of like in our areas of strength, how let me frame it like this. So I'm a big advocate of finding a balance. It's kind of, that's the essence of so many spiritual philosophies. If we think about yin and yang, for example, and that's also, with my background coming, from like my business entrepreneurship background, I had this very intense blow up a few years ago when I was like very much in my masculine essence of building and creating and, going all in on my strength, which after a certain period of time ultimately broke down because I was going all in too much, right? There was no balance really in my life. So where I want to go with this is the question, like, how do we balance following our drives, or like living out our drives, following our purpose, if you want so, because I'm, after I realized during my Tantra yoga teacher training, which I did a few months ago in India, I told you about, that was when my creativity and drive came back after, having shut down my business, I think like 6-7 months prior. And even before that, like the last 1 year, 1.5 years of running my business, I was already very tired and exhausted. And I still kept it running because yeah, that's a very good question, because I mean, it's complex. It brought money and safety, validation, status, and so on. But I was afraid about like, once I quit it, once I shut it down, like what happens then? Am I just going to be, Eckhart Tolle sitting on a bench in a park and watching ducks, and then it was only when I took that break that after a few months, this energy came back. And that's why we're sitting here now, because I feel this drive and this creativity again to build something. And so my question is, how do we find the balance?
Well, thank you for that. And I do hear the question. What I hear, tell me if I'm on the right track here, is, I mean, I don't generally talk about balance, because there's a lot of pop culture around trying to achieve balance. And sometimes the achieving of balance feels like as much a kind of, outward goal.
Yeah.
Just feels like another thing to tick on the box. Have you, are you eating clean? Are you, got a low carbon footprint, and are you balanced? It can be it's kind of counter, it's counter to, because it just feels like another burden, really. What I hear in your question is, can I pursue the kind of my interests and my creative, what gets me alive? Can I pursue those, and they can be quite intense, or consuming, and can that send me out of balance if I or must I kind of keep a handbrake on them? So my response to that, we haven't spoken about it, but I'm a creative person. I work in the creative industries in many capacities. So for me, the creative process is not one of balance, not in the small time frame. So a creative process may require you to retreat from the world and incubate an idea. And then a time comes when you need to take action. And when you take action and you're trying to build something that is new, it requires a lot of resources. So if you're trying to keep balanced every day, for example, or every week, that creative process is going to be hampered, because you're going to feel some kind of pressure or shame to keep up your social commitments, or keep up your daily meditation practice, or keep up your journaling, or make sure you don't spend too much, or all of that. So as a creative person, I find those ideas are unhelpful.
So are you saying our Qigong teacher, Master Leo, you wouldn't be capable of?
Well, so this is the distinction. So I'm outlining what facilitates a life that feels alive. And creative work, aside from being an incredible place to do some of the alchemy that I mentioned earlier, that is to transform some of the burdens we carry into light, into offerings for the world. That's creative work, and that requires these kind of processes that go like this. they expand and they contract. They need outward movement and they need inner work. Over a longer timeline, that looks like balance, because it's in the same way that the seasons across a year are balanced. You could think we've had a heat wave for 2 weeks. That's not in balance. Not in those 2 weeks. It's not. It's just one extreme. But over the course of a year, it's in balance. And over the course of multiple years, when there's some years of drought and some years of high rainfall, there is a kind of ebb and flow. So I think ebb and flow is possibly a more helpful idea than balance. Now, you mentioned our Qigong teacher, who often talks about equanimity, really, and not letting the energies get too high or too low, which is, of course, a spiritual tradition and a spiritual practice, and is present in Buddhism and many of the spiritual practices. I have a big question mark in my life and my journey, how to marry what I know about my creative pursuits and what I know about my spiritual pursuits. And I haven't yet found the most elegant way to express that. If I had to now, just on pure instinct, I would say, why do we want equilibrium? Do we want equilibrium because we are too afraid to, if we express ourselves, we might lose ourselves? Are we afraid if we feel a feeling, we might not be able to survive it? We can seek equilibrium for the wrong reasons, is what I'm saying. And there's a term for that, and that's called spiritual bypassing. So many people in an ashram, in a retreat, in a vipassana, are trying to escape because they cannot contain the depth of feeling or the psychic, the intensity of some thoughts which cannot live in harmony. A traumatic experience, rejection, idea that they may be fundamentally a terrible person that can only ever actually act in their self-interest or hurt people. Those are very, very compelling and terrifying ideas. And one way to survive those is to seek equilibrium in order to not in order not to be sort of sunk by those. And it generally is what sets most people out on the path. But at a certain point of stilling the mind and the heart, one has to come to the point where you realize staying in the ashram or on the mat or on the cushion is actually a form of
Escapism.
Of escape, of numbing, of fear, really, of the world. So then and once you know that, you can no longer sit, because you know that your sitting is really, even if you've spent 10 years mastering meditation techniques that allow you to still your mind, it's predicated on you remaining kind of in an ashram or away from the things which trigger you. And so the part of the hero's journey that comes next really is the return, to home. And can I be alive and maintain connection to that inner depth? So to answer the question about balance, I would say a balanced life, if you want to use that terminology, which I don't particularly like, is to know the root and to know the blossom. And I would say the root is that Qigong practice, that meditation, and the blossom, the sort of waving tree, is our creative and expressive spirit. And a wholehearted life, which is the terminology that I've used, which is not a balanced life. A wholehearted life is, I'm touched by the world. Is a monk touched by the world? Maybe. I mean, our Qigong teacher says, if you are in balance, then joy rises. It just arises. But if you're holding too tightly on the need for equanimity, that you cannot be touched by life, then I would have some, alarm bells around spiritual bypassing.
Yeah, I really resonate with what you just said, and it pretty much represents my experience in that Indian ashram. I always had this kind of like tendency or fantasy of retreating, be it into an ashram or like similar to one of my absolute all-time favorite movies, Into the Wild.
Okay.
Have you seen it?
I actually haven't seen it, but I do want to, and I have heard.
Highly recommend it. It's about a young idealistic guy who had just graduated. It's a based on a true story from I think from Harvard or something like that. And he finished his bachelor, and from one day to the next, he donated all of his money, which was like 20 grand or something, to Oxfam, and set out to, that was back in 1992, and set out to discover America, set out west. Yeah, he started out in Washington or something. And yeah, the story is about, him escaping into the wild and living a life away from society, from societal norms, just vagabonding through North America, I don't know, canoeing to the border of Mexico, and then traveling up north all the way to Alaska, where, well, I'm not going to spoil the final, but so I always had this, as I said, tendency, fantasy, surely also because I would say my inherent sensitivity, be it about myself or other people, or like the quote unquote world pain, to escape, to retreat from that. And when I did a Vipassana in 2023. There was only 10 days, but this time, after a month in the ashram, which was very, soothing, especially for my nervous system, I felt quite comfortable quite quickly. But after a month, I realized that someone's missing there. I kind of lost touch to the outside world, and also gained this very impactful realization that the life I had built outside of the ashram was pretty much already my dream life. And the experiences I was making, the freedom I was enjoying, to like that enabled kind of experiences like, I don't know, being able to attend a temple night, or starting this podcast now, or traveling through 35 countries, and with all the ups and downs, with the fuck ups on traveling, like almost losing my foot in India due to an infection or a heartbreak, or you name it, everything that kind of makes life to wholeheartedly worth living. There came this point where I was like, no, I want to go back. I want to go back into the matrix and play, experience all the light and the darkness of the world. And similar to you, I would say I've been through really darkness. So and came to a kind of surrendering of and accepting that this is part of the game. That's what makes life worth living. And now, maybe coming full circle, what also makes our life worth living is our sexuality, which gives us the opportunity to feel more alive. I mean, everybody who had sex in their life knows what I'm talking about, right?
Well, sex can also be a form of it can also result in some numbing and disconnection too.
Sure. Yeah.
Depends how you
Like
do it.
yeah, and it also has its shadow side for sure. But I remember a conversation we had 2 days ago when you also you went deeper into your perspective of what you see, what's lacking in Qigong, what's
Okay.
being neglected.
Okay.
So what's that in your
Well, it's
opinion?
funny because as you were talking, I was thinking about this idea that comes up a lot for me because you were talking about the ashram you were in, of how I experience it or how I express it is I go into various spaces. So these may be meditation spaces, they may be tantric spaces, they may be embodied spaces like contact improv. They may be kind of, well, that's enough examples. But I always feel that there's, well, Qigong spaces, so spaces which are, they're embodied and they are spiritually kind of in the right place for what I'm looking for, but they're missing, I often find they're missing one element. So in the tantric spaces, I'm often missing the heart and the mind. The tantric spaces are very embodied in this, in the sexuality and their aliveness, but they're either not grounded or there's not enough kind of wisdom, or there's not enough connection to the heart.
We're talking about Neo Tantra here. We got to specify.
Well, yes, we're talking about Neo Tantra in that instance, yes. But even in traditional Tantra spaces, I found a lack of ground and a lack of wisdom.
Mm.
I found a lot of kind of a lot of actually aliveness. I've been going on a lot about aliveness, so a lot of aliveness, but it's not grounded. So then there's not enough kind of root or wisdom there.
Can you give me an example? Because like I know Tantra, and Tantra is a very difficult term from what I've experienced because there's so many different approaches.
Yes.
And you know the way the experience I made in India was taught by a traditional Kaula Tantra teacher. And I even asked him, I don't know how many questions about the different styles of Tantra.
Right, yeah.
And he couldn't even name all of them,
yes,
right?
yeah.
So I would just be interested if you can just give us maybe a real quick example or an experience of yours. What kind of Tantra you...
Right, well, I let me just qualify that I've only been exposed in the traditional Tantra to Kashmiri Shivaism. And my experiences there have been incredibly embodied and incredibly in the heart. But I would say for me and for what I need, were not rooted enough and not clear-eyed enough. So when one enters the sort of realm of the body and the sexuality in a non-judgmental way, it can be incredibly enlivening because we are saying we're giving that part of ourselves an opportunity to kind of lead the whole show. You know, we're going to create a safe space where I can follow whatever impulse comes, and that can be incredibly enlivening and erotic, and not in the sexual sense, but in the aliveness. It can feel really, really good, and you can cry with relief at actually being in your body. But it can also be you can spend your whole life there, the way Odysseus kind of gets waylaid onto the island of the sirens and forgets that time has passed. You know, it can be a delicious dream. So that sometimes the awakeness is missing in my experience, which you can speak to your experience in India. You asked the question about Qigong, did you?
Right.
Yeah. So one of the things, so one of my question marks in Qigong is, where is the where does the kind of sexual aliveness and the erotic fit into that kind of monk-like approach, which really tries to avoid anything that is going to move you off your center. You know, Qigong and many martial art practices are about centering. And my question is there space for following one's kind of instinct? Because if one is centered, going back to creativity, and when it was never moved off one's center, one could never create anything. Because creativity is a daring act of impulse. But if one spends one's whole life in impulse and in creativity, and there's no center, well, you can miss your life. And we all know people who are pursuing only pleasure. And in fact, it's quite a big movement worldwide. There's even sort of like communities that are openly pursuing hedonism. And it's totally understandable, because we all know what it feels like to be deadened and dead and dislocated and shut down. And it's such a relief to be alive. But I and certainly the great stories all do warn of the kind of island of delights that one can spend lifetimes waylaid upon.
And that's where sexological bodywork comes into play. Am I right?
Well, sexological bodywork is a modality, a modality of learning and healing that arose out of the work of Joseph Kramer in the 80s, in the AIDS epidemic in America, at the time when gay men were too scared to engage in any sort of sexual contact out of fear of contracting HIV and AIDS. And Joseph Kramer developed a form of massage called the Taoist erotic massage to enable an experience of embodiment and of pleasure that was safe. And since then, it has evolved into a worldwide kind of it's recognized by the American and the Swiss government. It's a certified training that I've completed, and I'm soon will be a qualified sexological body worker, one of only a handful here in South Africa. And sexological body work offers a very safe and boundaried and contained way to explore some of the ways in which we may be disconnected from our liveness, and the ways in which our sexual experience may be disconnected from our heart and our minds sometimes. Many people, straight, gay, and otherwise, particularly people whose gender experience doesn't match those that the body they were born in, experience very their experience of their sexuality is impeded by either trauma or disconnection, numbness, deadness, challenges with intimacy. So sexological bodywork is really a kind of a therapeutic modality to address through the body, and primarily through touch, areas of disconnection. And it's been one of the ways in which I've brought together some of the parts of myself that were dislocated.
Yeah, it sounds to me, or I can see the potential in sexological bodywork to kind of make therapy more whole. Because I'm a big fan of bodywork. I mean, that was one of the most crucial elements of my recovery from PTSD, depression, and all this stuff. Because I experienced firsthand that And it's wild if we think about it. Like, our world is already so mind dominated, and then most therapists, the majority of psychotherapy is again very mind dominated, narrowed to, you know, working with our psyche, with our mind. And that was, I mean, in my work with my therapist, Rob Bennett, it was incredible to see the power of touch, like in sessions where he literally just placed his hand onto, I don't know, my gut area or something like that, or place it just holding my neck. What that this slight, like this minimum of amount of touch changed in the whole experience. And now, including, well, like going even deeper, like literally, I can only, I know, I can't even imagine how much potential there is. So I'm really curious to see where this is going to go. You want to say something about that?
No, I mean, I just to affirm that, you know, a lot of the trauma is stored in the body, and we know this, and we know in our day-to-day experience how we can want something up here, but our body says something else.
Yeah.
And how do we have that conversation? You know, many of us have, through actually a very, very strong mind, overridden our bodies, and it's actually quite a common. You see it quite commonly in these sort of social media accounts of particularly in, let's say, with male influencers who are kind of very proud of how far they've pushed their bodies,
like David Goggins.
Yeah.
And
the idea that you can push your body further but through your mind is seen. And let's balance the conversation. It's also in kind of spiritual traditions where people hang by hooks and walk on coals and tolerate no eating or drinking. And so there is this idea of the power really of the mind to override the information from the body.
Yeah, mind over matter.
Yeah. And I would say there's not enough conversation around, well, if we're doing that habitually, why are we surprised when the body's messages aren't going through anymore? When we are attracted to someone, but our erection it doesn't happen, you know, or we want to be penetrated, we desire the person, but our muscles are clenched, but we want it, but our body says something differently. Are we surprised by that if we have a culture of telling the body when it should perform or shouldn't perform, and making it perform when it doesn't want to perform? And even you could even argue that the sort of 8 to 5 workday is an example of that. Maybe our attention, you know, and those of us who struggle with, well, I don't want to use the word struggle. Those of us who have atypical brains in terms of our focus and attention, maybe our schooling system has already enforced a kind of pushing of our natural inclination to attend. Maybe we need shorter bursts, more breaks, etc.
I mean, neurology is quite, you know, there's common sense in neurology by now.
Yeah.
That this is totally.
So you can imagine how, you've said your experience of touch and body work. Now you can imagine how a touch practice that includes gentle touch, how therapeutic that can be when there are safe boundaries and full consent, and a practice that is going at the pace of the nervous system. It can get to where the work needs to happen much faster. I would say that the most powerful combination is work that goes like this and work that goes like this.
How do you combine your work in that area and your spiritual practices with your other profession, which is acting and directing?
Right. So yes, I mentioned that I work in the creative industries, and the primary industry that I work in is the entertainment industry, the film and television, theater. And I have worked since I was 16 I'm now 39 as an actor primarily. And in the last few years, I've begun to create work with people that I want to work with. That started out through creating an organization called the Queer Writers Incubator, which paired young queer writers of color with mentors in the industry to foster new talent writing work. Because I wanted to create work as a producer and as a director, and I wanted those stories to be told by people who had lived experiences that we were missing. And that has led to me producing a number of short films with some of the mentees that we have trained, and co-writing a film and directing it. And we're in our final stages of post-production. And that will start being screened at film festivals later this year and next year. So that's a big step for me. It's very exciting as a creative to have more agency in my work and to sort of express through storytelling some of these ideas. Of course, many of these ideas are more buried in the sort of DNA of the work and the way that the work is made in a sort of collaborative, flatter structure way that embodies these kinds of principles. But I haven't really done anything to bring these two worlds together or keep them apart. I see myself as a multifaceted person, and I pursue many different endeavors as part of my full expression of myself, and I don't see any contradiction or need to explain or need to hide. So I just continue to go about my work in all of these different spaces.
How did you become that fearless? Because I reckon that many, sexually atypical actors and actresses out there, if I may use it, because I'm refining my wording from the beginning.
I'm making a list. Unnormal and atypical. Okay, well, what else?
You used atypical, so I was thinking,
Yeah.
You just used it for, what did you say? Well, you used atypical, so I thought I would give it a shot.
Okay.
But how would you? What wording would you use?
Pioneer. Yeah. I mean, look. If you look at any of the coolest people making the coolest stuff in the world, you're gonna find an interesting way of living or an interesting life. I don't think I'm doing anything new, as much as I just call myself a pioneer. I think South Africa is slightly more traditional.
In terms of?
Just in terms of like how integrated sexuality is into our daily life, people talking about it, for example. It's not something
there's surely a British
about.
influence in here. I remember when my girlfriend and I went into one of the tile pools last year naked. We got warned by the lifeguards, who were very confused. And I was like, wait, why are you so what's the word? Not posh, but like
sort of prude.
Prude, that's the word I was looking for.
Yeah, and I mean, I love to be naked in nature, and I do it at any opportunity I can. But even I wouldn't swim naked in a public tidal pool.
Yeah, to be fair, we had just forgotten our swimsuits. I think it was something like that. So,
but because I'm so aware of of this kind of it's a kind of Protestant Christian conservatism, really. But going back to my point around wherever you find artists making interesting work, you will find a rich and colorful life.
Sure.
And this goes back into history, and not just Western history, but African history. if you kind of look at the kind of healers and you know, there you find queerness, you find incredible expressions of individuality. I don't think I'm doing anything new in not finding a contradiction or a need to explain the various aspects of my pursuits. How did I become fearless? I mean, I don't think I'm fearless. I do think I was ruled by fear in a way for a long time, and it wore me down and thin. And in order to make creative work, you can't be thin and worn. You need to be full. So it's pragmatic. It's pragmatic. It's like, okay, if I have to offer something, I have to really inhabit my life. And I can't inhabit my life if I'm preoccupied with how I'm perceived. You know, and this is an actor's problem, really. An actor is required to be in the scene and full of the experience of the character. And if they're too preoccupied with how they are being received, the performance will come across as self-conscious, and the audience will not have an opportunity to connect to the story. So it's something I've had to learn vocationally, but also pragmatically. Yeah, as a creative person, you can't afford to be concerned. Fear is the biggest dampener on creative expression. So, and actually, the sexological body work, the tantric work that I've done, and the pure body work that I've done, have really helped me to understand the sources of the fear. And I mean, for me, if we talk about shadow work, I don't know that much about shadow work in terms of like theory, but I know that I would say for me, certainly most of that is fear, working with fear. How do you not let fear rule your life? Yeah.
So the path to growth and creativity, creative expression, has to go through darkness and fear.
Through the eye of the needle. Yeah. My first meditation teacher used to say, can you walk slowly and kind of methodically towards your greatest fear?
What's your greatest fear?
That I'll regress.
How would that look like?
Falling back into old patterns again and again, and all my work being for naught. Yeah.
That sounds like the perfect way to end this podcast. Maybe to add one more question, because in the beginning I shared this thought with you that I was thinking about renaming this podcast to Man's Search for Meaning. Because that really resonates with my journey. And so I would be curious, what does make life meaningful for you?
All of the various episodes on the way, all of the things we have to go through in order to get to where we're going. It's those kind of things that happen to you despite your best attempts. It's that kind of unpredictable factor. I think that's the source of delight in a life, and a source of meaning from holding on to the kind of golden thread that you know you need to keep following. Yeah.
Beautiful. So live for the uncertainty.
Yeah, embrace uncertainty. Yeah. It is the source of aliveness. Yeah.
Well, speaking of uncertainty, I know you particularly said in the beginning you're not here to promote your movie. Yet I'm still personally very interested, and I would just like to use the opportunity to let you share when we can expect it and how we can find it.
Okay, well, you can put my social media
Sure.
under this. And the film will be finished at the end of April, probably. And I will announce on my social media which film festival it will premiere at. It is still TBC where that will be. Yeah, I think that answers the question.
Exciting times.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, this was Francis Julie. I really appreciate you as my friend and the things you've shared here, courageously, radically honest. I really do appreciate that.
Thank you. It's been an honor and a privilege to be here.
Cool.